Shadowing with Shaynna, the race to the South Pole. Since the dawn of time, humans have wanted to see what's over the next rise, and what lay beyond the sea. Courageous explorers would travel to new areas and return with wondrous tales of the things they saw. In the early 20th century, two intrepid explorers were vying to be the first person to set foot on the South Pole. They were Robert Falcon Scott from England and Roald Amundsen from Norway. Each man had different routes planned. For reaching the South Pole, and different reasons for wanting to be the first. Scott and his team set out for Antarctica on June 15, 1910. Their goal was to continue the scientific research they had done on a previous expedition. Scott's team set up a base camp and made several short journeys, aiming to chart the geography of the continent. They also collected eggs from emperor penguins. As for Amundsen, he once aspired to be the first person to reach the North Pole. But that honor went to other explorers. When Amundsen departed for the South Pole, in September 1910, he sent a telegram letting Scott know that he was going to try to reach the location first. At that point, Scott's scientific expedition became a race to make history. He and 4 other members of his team decided to push forward towards the pole. Scott and his team reached the South Pole on January 17, 1912. But they were greeted by a tent with some supplies left by Amundsen. The Norwegian group had beaten them to the pole. by about 5 weeks, and had placed flags there to mark their presence. Defeated and depressed, Scott's team had to turn around and start marching back to their base. Sadly, none of them survived. There were terrible snowstorms and temperatures far below zero, and the entire team perished on the return trip. Their frozen bodies were found by a search party 10 months later. Amundsen received congratulations from the President of the United States and the King of England for his historic feat. But the achievement was tarnished because of Scott's tragic end. People thought that Amundsen had forced the race to happen and stolen the glory from Scott, who would have been the first to reach the South Pole. If not for Amundsen's ambitions. Later analysis showed that Amundsen's team was better prepared and better equipped than Scott's. However, the bravery of both men is undeniable. The current scientific base, located at the South Pole, is named the Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station. To honor the memories of these two Antarctic pioneers. Shadowing with Shaynna. Shocking moments in sports. Sports are fun to watch because they can be unpredictable. You never know who's going to win. Every once in a while, though, something even more unexpected happens during a sporting event. Here are 5 of the most shocking sports moments that have gone down in history. Number 1. Randy Johnson was one of the most formidable pitchers in baseball. For many years. Not only was he a giant at 6'10", but he also had one of the best fastballs in the sport. He could throw a ball at a lethal speed. Of over 100 miles an hour. During a spring training game, Randy wound up and delivered his signature pitch. At that exact moment, a dove flew into the path of the ball. And was killed instantly in an explosion of feathers. The odds of that must have been 1,000,000 to 1. The only good news is that the poor bird probably never felt a thing. Number 2. Fans were looking forward to the boxing match between Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield. Who was trying to regain the championship. He had lost to Bowe the prior year. Nobody could have predicted what happened. During the 7th round, though, a man with a parachute descended from above and landed on the edge of the ring. It interrupted the fight for 20 minutes. As security guards dragged the man away. And tried to stop him from being beaten up. By the angry crowd. The chaos caused Bowe's pregnant wife to faint. And she had to be taken away on a stretcher. This likely affected his concentration. But the fight went on. Holyfield ended up winning by decision. Number 3. Auto racing is a dangerous sport by nature. And crashes are sometimes fatal. Dale Earnhardt Sr. was one of the most successful drivers of all time. Both he and his son were competing in the Daytona 500. And the cars were on the final lap. Earnhardt's car was bumped by another. Sending it out of control. And it slammed into the wall. Earnhardt was pulled from the wreckage unconscious. As his son ran to be by his side. He was taken to the hospital, but later died from his injuries. All of this took place on live television. Number 4. It was an intense game between France and Italy. In the 2006 World Cup final. France had scored the first goal, but Italy tied the game 20 minutes later. The score remained 1-1. Even after overtime. Players from both teams had mostly been civil to each other, since nobody wanted to risk giving the other side a penalty. But when the Italian player Marco Materazzi exchanged heated words with the French star Zinedine Zidane, things took a strange turn. Zidane delivered a strong headbutt to Materazzi's chest, knocking him to the ground. Zidane received a red card and was kicked out of the game. And the Italians won 5-3. In penalty kicks. Number 5. In 1989, the third game of the World Series Baseball Championship, was about to start in California. The commentators were having a pre-game chat on the air, when suddenly the screen began flickering. And then went blank. It was an earthquake. It only lasted 15 seconds, but it was San Francisco's most powerful quake. In the past 83 years, pieces of concrete fell from the stadium. But fortunately, most of the fans were not yet in their seats. But the local power went out, and the game had to be postponed. Shadowing with Shaynna, Myths about Mental Illness. Most people know very little about mental illness. And this is how the misconceptions and stereotypes arise. In the past, mentally ill people were thought to be possessed by demons, or simply written off as crazy, even though we now have a wealth of scientific knowledge about mental disorders. False beliefs are still prevalent among the general population. The first myth is that mental illnesses aren't real medical conditions, and that people who suffer from them should just snap out of it or pull themselves together. A mental illness might not be as visible as a broken arm, but it's an equally valid medical problem. Mental health issues aren't caused by personal weaknesses or failings. So they can't be cured by simply deciding to feel better. These are complex conditions that are influenced by a variety of factors, including biology, genetics, life experiences, and past traumas. Another common misconception about people who experience mental illness is that they are violent. Statistics show that mentally ill people are no more violent than the general population. Only 3 to 5% of violent acts are committed by people who have a serious mental illness. The rest are performed by mentally healthy people who just want to hurt someone else. In fact, people with mental health issues are far more likely to harm themselves or be the victims of violence than to harm others. Many people think it's impossible to recover from mental illness. This isn't necessarily true either. While there are some issues that will never disappear, it's possible to get treatment that will help keep the symptoms under control. Treatment may include medication, therapy, and learning specific strategies to cope with one's mental illness in daily life. People who are willing to follow the treatment can live long, productive lives with healthy relationships and careers. It's important to get rid of these myths about mental illness, especially because a large number of people will experience some form of it, or have a friend or relative who does. At some point in their lives. It may not be permanent, but it can still affect a person significantly. For a period of time. Even though mental health issues are fairly common, there is still a massive stigma around them. Because of this, many people go undiagnosed. They might be afraid to get help, since they're worried about how others might view them. They would rather try to keep things to themselves. Even though their problems might be making their lives miserable. There needs to be more support for people who are suffering from mental illness, so they can get help without being judged. Looked down on or excluded. It's important for everyone to understand that people with mental health issues are human beings, and they deserve love and respect. Shadowing with Shaynna. Best practices for buying a house. Real estate is a huge investment, and it can be daunting. First-time home buyers often have no idea where to begin. Sure, it's exciting to start browsing the real estate listings, but if you don't take certain precautions, Your dream house could end up being a real headache. Here's how you can buy your first house in a smart and sensible way. One of the biggest mistakes that new home buyers make is overestimating what they can afford. You might want to get a giant 5-bedroom home with a 3-car garage and a swimming pool. But does that make sense for your family's budget? You would be saddled with huge monthly mortgage payments, not to mention the insurance for the property, as well as maintenance and major repairs. Your credit history plays a huge role in determining whether or not you're able to get a loan for your home. It also influences the terms of the mortgage. The worse your credit score, the more you'll be paying in interest. Before you start applying for loans, you should check your credit. If there are any debts, take the time to pay them off and bump your credit score up a bit. Before buying a house, it can save you thousands of dollars. In the long run, getting pre-approved for a loan is another wise move. This will show the sellers that you're serious about buying, making them more likely to accept your offer. A pre-approval also lets you know exactly how much you'll be able to borrow. So you're less tempted to stray outside your price range. There is a difference between needs and wants, and you have to make sure you know which is which. When you choose a home, if you have a limited budget, it means you have to compromise. Make a list of the things that are truly non-negotiable for you, and check potential homes against your criteria. Sometimes people are so obsessed with becoming homeowners that they don't stop to think about. Where they are buying. Is the neighborhood safe enough to walk around? And for your kids to play outside? How close are the schools and supermarkets? Is the house in a convenient location? Make it a priority to save up for the down payment. A great strategy is to set up a separate bank account and make a deposit there every month. Having the money set aside will prevent you from spending it on day-to-day stuff. When you make a bigger down payment, it means that there will be less debt and less interest to pay off. As the years go by, you could go through the entire process of buying your first home on your own, but it might not be very pleasant. It's a complicated process, and there's a ton of paperwork to handle. Working with a real estate agent who you trust can save your time and sanity. If your finances are in order and you follow these best practices, buying your first house will be an exciting occasion. Happy house hunting! Shadowing with Shaynna, the world's newest countries. International borders aren't set in stone. Throughout human history, the lines on the maps that separate one country from another have been erased and redrawn countless times. This even happens in modern days, as evidenced by these 5 new countries. That have emerged within our lifetimes. South Sudan. The African nation of Sudan had been embroiled in a civil war for decades. After years of bloody battles that cost the lives of 2 million people, South Sudan held a vote To determine whether to become independent, from the northern regions, 99% of the population voted in favor, and South Sudan became the world's newest country on July 9, 2011. Unfortunately, the young country is still fraught with problems. South Sudan is rich in oil, but it's also landlocked and doesn't have its own pipeline for transport. There are serious problems with water supply and health care, and many of the people live in poverty. To make things worse, power struggles between political leaders led to a civil war, which caused more than 1 million people to be displaced from their homes. A peace agreement was signed in August 2015, and only time will tell if the violence has truly come to an end. Kosovo. By 2008, the United Nations had been administering the Kosovo region of Serbia for the previous 9 years, and the negotiations about its future seemed to be going nowhere. Kosovo declared its independence, but international reactions were mixed, and some countries don't officially recognize Kosovo to this day. Russia was especially displeased with the split, and Serbia was worried about the Serbs, who became an ethnic minority in Kosovo. There are still many issues to sort out in the small mountainous country. Organized crime is rampant, and the unemployment rate is insanely high at 35%. Montenegro and Serbia. These lands were once a part of Yugoslavia, until that country collapsed in 1991. One of the new nations formed was known as Serbia and Montenegro. Then, in 2006, they split into two distinct countries. They were still represented by a single soccer team in the World Cup that year. Since the breakup was finalized just a few weeks prior to the tournament. East Timor. East Timor was colonized by Portugal. And when the Portuguese left in 1975, the country enjoyed just 9 days of freedom. Before being invaded and claimed by Indonesia. This resulted in decades of brutal clashes between separatist groups and the Indonesian military. The UN eventually stepped in, and Indonesia relinquished the territory. At the time of East Timor's independence, there was a lot of work to be done. Almost 70% of the buildings in the country had been destroyed by the fighting. Since then, East Timor has made great strides in improving its economy and quality of life. According to the World Bank, it takes an average of 15 to 30 years for new countries to stabilize and develop. After a history of conflict. Let's hope that these new countries have a better future ahead. Shadowing with Shaynna, Strange Habits of Famous People. All of us have our individual quirks. For example, maybe you bite your fingernails, crack your knuckles, or have to look at the Q-tip when you pull it out of your ear. But these odd little habits pale in comparison to the ones in this article. After seeing how weird famous people can be, you're bound to feel pretty normal. Dali and Da Vinci barely slept. Salvador Dali was one of the most gifted artists. Ever to pick up a paintbrush. He was also one of the most eccentric. And you can't help but look at many of his paintings and wonder what was going through his mind while he was creating them. His surrealistic artwork looks like it came from someone who saw the world very differently. He didn't sleep very often, and when he did, it was only a short nap. He would hold a metal key in his hand while sitting in a chair, and he would have a plate set just below the key. When he started to fall asleep, the key would fall from his hand, hit the plate, and wake him up. Dali believed that you didn't need any more sleep than that. Leonardo da Vinci had a similar pattern. It's said that he never slept for more than 2 hours a day. And those 2 hours were not in a row. After 4 hours of work, he would nap for about 20 minutes, and then wake up and get back to work. This routine could cause the artists to experience a mental state in between sleep and wakefulness, which can sometimes result in hallucinations. Crazy skincare. As an actress, Terry Hatcher cares a lot about keeping her skin smooth and young-looking. But she has an unusual way of doing so. Terry likes to take baths with a cup of red wine added to the water. The chemicals in the grapes supposedly improve your circulation. And give you softer skin. At least it's not like Elizabeth Bathory, a Hungarian countess who lived in the 16th century. She was a serial killer, and according to folklore, she would bathe in the blood of virgins in order to preserve her youth. Keeping the sodas in line. David Beckham, a super famous soccer player, says he has a slight obsessive-compulsive disorder. That compels him to keep everything in a straight line or in pairs. The soda cans in his refrigerator need to be lined up, and they must be in sets of 2. It bothers him if there is an extra, so he will remove it and put it somewhere else so that he doesn't have to see it. The color purple. Mariah Carey, the talented and beautiful singer, seems to have a thing for the color purple. One of her habits is apparently eating purple food 3 days a week, such as plums, eggplants, berries, and grapes. She claims it helped her lose weight after giving birth to her twins. Although purple fruits and vegetables do have a lot of nutrients, it's best to fill your plate with all the colors of the rainbow. Shadowing with Shaynna, the dangers of online shaming. These days we can communicate with anyone and everyone instantaneously. We can connect with family and friends through social media. We can follow celebrities and politicians on Twitter and Facebook. And we can learn about breaking news from the other side of the planet right as it's happening. The flow of information is practically non-stop, and many of us have our lives on public display online. There are lots of benefits to living in an interconnected world. But when a person does something bad, things can take a nasty turn. Instead of being forgiven and forgotten, the incident can blow up into something that ruins the person's life. Online shaming is the digital age equivalent of throwing rotten fruit at someone. Only instead of just a handful of townsfolk with old tomatoes, it is the entire internet. ready to unleash hell on anyone whose bad behavior comes into the spotlight. We all say and do things that are stupid without realizing how others will react. There was a woman at Arlington National Cemetery who posed in front of a sign that requested silence and respect, and she appeared to be yelling and giving the middle finger. The photo went viral, and the woman was torn apart online. She was fired from her job and was afraid to leave her house for almost a year because of the threats. The woman explained that she and her friend had an ongoing joke about doing the opposite of what signs say, and then taking pictures in front of them, like photos of themselves smoking in front of no smoking signs. She apologized for her lapse in judgment and said she meant no disrespect to the soldiers buried in the cemetery. Yes, the photo was offensive and regrettable. But did she deserve to lose her job and social freedom because of it? Let's look at the case of Adria Richards, a consultant who attended a tech convention in 2013. She overheard some male attendees making crude jokes, and she found them upsetting. She took a photo of the two and put it up on Twitter, where she had over 9,000 followers. After the post was shared hundreds of times, the media got wind of it. One of the men's employers recognized him, and he lost his job because of his comments. This didn't sit well with some folks, who got outraged and started to harass Richards online. She was later let go from her job too. The situation escalated far beyond what she ever imagined. When something with even a hint of controversy crops up online, it has the potential to spread like wildfire. It's hard to control, and it never ends well. It's inevitable that some of the things people say and do are dumb, wrong, and offensive. But when society gangs up on these people, and shames them online, it often has devastating effects that are disproportionate to the original offense. When someone behaves badly, the best course of action is usually to deal with it in the moment, not to broadcast it online. Public shaming has gotten to the point where the online defenders of justice are actually becoming bullies themselves. Shadowing with Shaynna, creative date ideas. When most people think of a date, what comes to mind is the typical dinner and a movie. But if you think outside the box, there are a lot of alternative activities that would make great dates. Whether you're getting to know somebody new or looking to add some variety to your current relationship, these date ideas will definitely be fun. Go for a bike ride. If the weather is nice, why not go for a ride? If you don't have bikes, you can always rent them for a couple of hours. You can pedal through the park, along the boardwalk, or around the town. Bonus points if you pack a picnic. So that you can relax and have a bite to eat in a scenic spot. Head to a museum or art gallery. A rainy day doesn't have to spoil your plans for a date. One great indoor activity is going to a museum or art gallery. Check to see if they are holding Any special exhibits? That might be interesting. And you can spend hours admiring the displays. A date like this is better than a movie because you can talk about the exhibits and get to know each other. Take a cooking class. Even if you're clueless in the kitchen, taking a cooking class together with your date can be a fun bonding experience. Instead of learning to make dishes, you're already familiar with, do something a bit different. Maybe you want to learn how to prepare sushi. Or you'd like to try your hand at making fancy desserts. You'll pick up new skills and learn how to make dishes that you can try to reproduce at home later. Learn to dance. Dance lessons are fantastic for building a connection with your date, as well as helping you both learn some new moves. From salsa to swing dance, there are styles to suit everyone's tastes. Many studios have sessions for everybody. From complete beginners to more advanced dancers. If you're especially self-conscious, book a private lesson for just you and your date. A lot of couples like to do this in the months leading up to their wedding. Enjoy amusement parks. Going to an amusement park is a highlight of the summer for many kids. And as an adult, you can go whenever you want. You and your date can go on rides, play the games, and watch shows or performances. It's a wonderful way to spend the day. If you don't have any parks in your area, keep an eye out for fairs and festivals. that are within driving distance. Another option is an indoor arcade. You can compete against each other or team up to win points and prizes at the games. Become a tourist in your own city. If you've lived in the same place for a long time, you might not appreciate all the things your city has to offer. Bring your date to some of the local tourist attractions and landmarks. And have a meal at one of the well-known restaurants. Not only will you have a great time, but you'll gain a new appreciation for your city. Each of these creative date ideas will be a day or night to remember. Why not try one of them out this week? Shadowing with Shaynna, 5 fascinating plants. How many different types of plants would you guess there are in the world? 10,000? 100,000? The answer is closer to 500,000. And some of these plants are really bizarre. Check out these fascinating facts about 5 species of plants. Cordyceps. Cordyceps is a category of fungi. With more than 400 different species. Some of which are very beneficial to humans. These fungi have long been used in traditional medicine for everything from treating coughs and respiratory problems to being considered an aphrodisiac. One of the most interesting varieties of cordyceps is straight out of a horror movie. It essentially turns ants into zombies. The spores from the plant infect the ants and take over their brains. This causes them to climb up to the highest point possible and to stay there as the fungus grows inside them. It then bursts through the insect's body to spray its spores, and the process repeats. Thankfully, cordyceps can't affect humans in this way. Lithops. This is a plant that looks more like a stone. A lithops plant has 2 thick leaves. That are not green, like the majority of plants. Instead, they are gray or brown. With markings that help them blend in with their surroundings. When the plant reaches maturity, a yellow or white flower blossoms between the leaves. This plant is found in southern Africa, and it can live 50 years or more. The leaves will only appear during the rainy season. Corpse flower. This is the largest individual flower found on the planet. A single blossom can measure 3 feet across and can weigh up to 24 pounds. It grows in the rainforests of Borneo and Sumatra, and the blossom only lasts a few days. You might be wondering how this plant got its unusual name. Once you get close enough, you'll know. The flower smells like rotting meat. This odor attracts insects, which then perform pollination and help the plant reproduce. It's a good thing. Most other flowers haven't evolved to have the same fragrance. Hydnora africana. If you came across this plant, you'd probably think you'd discovered some strange monster. The plant grows mostly underground. Except for a flower that looks like 3 claws or mandibles. Covered in tiny hairs. This flower wouldn't make a very romantic gift, though, since it smells like feces. Dung beetles are drawn to the plant. which then traps them inside the flower. For several days, to coat them with pollen. Floating bladderwort. This plant grows in lakes and ponds. And is present on every continent except Antarctica. It may look nice with its small yellow flowers, but beneath the surface of the water, it is a killer. The floating bladderwort grows a network of branches with small compartments to trap its prey. The compartments appear to be closed, but when an insect or a tiny aquatic animal touches one, it gets sucked in and eaten by the plant. This is just a small sample of the amazing diversity that exists in the plant world. Next time you're out on a hike, take the time to examine the plants along your path. Shadowing with Shaynna. Embarrassing moments in politics. Despite tons of preparation, it's not uncommon for politicians to say and do ridiculous things. It can certainly make you cringe, but it can also be very entertaining. Let's have a look at some of the most embarrassing political moments in recent memory. A broken promise. Politicians often make far-reaching promises when in reality they only deliver a fraction of what they claim. That's nothing new. Yet they keep making promises, some of which come back to bite them. In the 1988 presidential campaign, George Bush Sr. looked straight into the cameras at the Republican National Convention and declared that he would not raise taxes under any circumstances. Naturally, this sounded good to Americans. And he was voted into office. But in 1990, when the recession started, he had no choice but to go back on his word. This hurt his chances. In the next election, when Bill Clinton won by a landslide. Bill and the ladies. Bill Clinton has a charming personality. And that was partially what helped him win 2 terms in the White House. He also had a reputation as being a womanizer and was accused of sexually harassing Paula Jones. A former government employee. She filed a lawsuit against him. And in her testimony, the name of Monica Lewinsky appeared. Monica was a young intern who'd had an affair with Clinton. This led to a lengthy investigation. Of the president's sexual acts, which was an embarrassment for his wife Hillary, as well as for the nation. Clinton's lies and evasive answers during the trial led to his impeachment. Attack of the shoes. President George W. Bush was not popular overseas, and by some accounts, he was not very well liked at home either. He was so despised in the Middle East that an Iraqi journalist stood up during a press conference and threw both of his shoes at President Bush as a sign of his discontent with the way things were being handled in his country. This is considered a major insult in Arab culture. Bush showed remarkable reflexes as he was able to dodge both of the shoes. He then carried on with the press conference without seeming too fazed by the event. One has to wonder exactly what the Secret Service was doing at the time, though. If it couldn't even protect the president, from an attack with shoes. A bad shot. Dick Cheney, who was vice president for George W. Bush, went hunting with his friend, attorney Harry Whittington. While they were in the field, Cheney accidentally shot his friend in the face. The only reason Harry wasn't killed is that they were using birdshot, which is one of the smallest types of bullets. There were about 30 fragments that the doctors were unable to remove, including one located near his heart. Cheney was ridiculed by comedians and journalists for the incident.